The Timberwolves lose their fourth straight game. Plenty of culprits in this one. We'll talk about lazy defense, the bad non-Ant offense, and what the biggest issues were in the clutch next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. It's a not-so-happy Friday after the Timberwolves dropped their fourth straight game to the Chicago Bulls on Thursday night. And yes, some of these losses have been ugly. The Bulls one was competitive but disappointing. Explainable, considering Anthony Edwards' struggles, and we'll talk about that. But really, it was in all facets, which is like something a football coach would say, right? In all three phases of the game. That's what happened in this one. I have three big things for you from this one. We're going to start with the defense, which was bad. We'll get to the offense, which was inconsistent, spotty. And then finally, we'll get to crunch time, where the offense was very bad and the defense was also bad. So we'll talk about both phases, offense and defense, and then the clutch, what the biggest problems were there. And of course, as always on the post-game pod, we'll close with individual studs and duds. We'll do all that on today's show. First, a big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. All right. So the Wolves came into this one on a 3-game losing streak. Obviously, Tuesday was, we'll call it a debacle, the loss to the Jazz. And coming back home after the 4-game road trip, it's fair to wonder, what's the energy going to look like? But at the same time, a healthy Timberwolves team, obviously still minus Terrence Shannon Jr., facing a relatively healthy Bulls team, actually. Like, everybody that had been questionable and in and out of the lineup for them played. But it was like, all right, they're going to be home. There's going to be some energy because they can't afford to lose 4 straight. And that's exactly what happened. The Wolves came out like gangbusters. They jumped out to a pretty significant lead. They were up double digits early in the first quarter. What was the exact score? I mean, they were up 8-0, and then it was 13-5 before the Bulls called their timeout, 13-4. Well, actually, it was 13-3 before Anthony Edwards committed his second foul, and it was on a shooting foul. From outside, a 3-point shooting foul by Coby White. Or a 3-point attempt by Coby White. So not only was it Ant's second foul, both were silly, but it was also on a 3-pointer. It's just a devastating foul. It becomes 13-5. And, again, it was 23-10. So even with Ant out of the game, they were up 13 with 4 minutes left in the first quarter. But then the wheels fell off defensively, and the offense got stuck in mud without Anthony Edwards. And this was just a close game the rest of the way. So Wolves were up 6 at the end of the first quarter. They were up 1 at halftime. They were down 3 going into the fourth quarter, and it was back and forth throughout the fourth quarter. In fact, the Wolves were up with just about a minute to play by 3 points. And we'll get into that in a little bit, what happened down the stretch. But this was just a back and forth game against a very mediocre team, a team that's now exactly 500 in the Eastern Conference. I did take the over on the Bulls before the season. I think their number was like 33.5 or something, and I think they'll finish. Obviously, they're on pace to finish ahead of that. I do think Chicago is better than what a lot of people think. They've had a lot of injuries, etc. But there's no excuse. Like, the Wolves should win this game, right? The Wolves should beat Chicago, 8 times out of 10, 7 times out of 10. And obviously they blew them up by 35 the last time they played, and both Coby White and Josh Giddey left that game early due to injury. But and Coby White was really good in this game, by the way. So, well, actually, Josh Giddey was too. They both were very good. So there's really no excuse. And I want to start. I'm going to do 3 big things today, which I do often on the post-game pod. And we're going to start with the Ant foul trouble. Well, no, actually, let's start with the defense. So the biggest problem against the Jazz on Tuesday in that track meet of a game was the defense, right? The Wolves scored 1 billion points, 120-some points, enough points to win the game. The problem was the defense. And Utah's got a little bit of an underrated offense. Even without Lauri Markkanen, they're okay offensively. But again, not an excuse. The Timberwolves defense was just flat out bad. Basically nobody was competing defensively. McDaniels was bad defensively. I thought Ant was poor defensively. I thought DiVincenzo was bad defensively. It was basically Rudy and Was it McDaniels? No, sorry, not McDaniels. Was it Randle that actually competed? No, Randle was awful defensively Tuesday. There was one other guy that I thought, I don't have my Tuesday notes in front of me, but that competed, and everybody else was just lazy. Thursday against the Bulls, the Jalen Clark, I think is who I'm thinking of from Tuesday. Thursday against the Bulls, the defense was lazy, but it was kind of like under the radar lazy. A lot of times, if the Timberwolves are called for a ton of fouls and the opponent shoots a lot of free throws, you can point to it and say, all right, they're being aggressive, right? They're being handsy, but in a good way, right? They're on the ball, they're being difficult to get around, they're contesting shots in the paint. Sometimes you can say free throw attempts are a good indicator of how aggressive a defense is being. That is the opposite of the case in this game. The Wolves allowed 33 free throws for the Bulls. They were called for 27 personal fouls. Julius Randle fouled out for the Wolves. Ant finished with 5 fouls. Nas had 4 fouls in just 29 minutes. And the frequency of foul calls against Minnesota and therefore the free throw attempts by the Bulls was because the Wolves weren't moving their feet. It was lazy defense, masquerading as, oh, we're being really physical. No, they weren't moving their feet. They weren't sliding in front of guys or staying in front of guys. They weren't helping each other. The low man help was non-existent. The Bulls' points in the paint, we'll talk about that a little bit, but I guess now's as good a time as any. The Wolves gave up. Minnesota ended up being a +4 points in the paint, but especially early in this game, it was the points of the paint. And the perimeter defense, as unfortunately has been typical here recently, was atrocious. There just was a lack of effort, like true effort. It was, I'll slide a little and then I'll grab and get called for the foul. Or I'll grab this cutter by the arm because I don't actually want to keep up with him. I just want to try and slow him down a little. Like Ant got caught with that one for, I think, his 3rd foul, where I don't even remember who the cutter was, but he just grabbed his arm instead of just running with him or even bumping him. You probably don't get called for that, but you grab his arm, in an obvious way, you're going to get called for the foul, whether or not he grabbed you first. Like that, you just don't do that. And it wasn't just Ant, it was everybody. But the grabbing and holding and hacking and all that stuff because the feet weren't moving, that's an effort thing. It's just, it looks a little different than the effort against the Jazz on Tuesday. I thought that was a major problem in this game. My second big thing, Anthony Edwards off night. And not just that, because everyone is allowed to have an off night. But it was the fact that there was no other offense to support. And then second to that, this is like a 3 sub bullet points, big thing point that I'm making, because there's the Ant off night, which was a big deal. It was exposed by the lack of additional offensive support. And then it's also a rotation thing, because when both Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards are off the floor, the offense ground to a halt. And Chris Finch keeps doing this, where they're and this is a little different because of the foul trouble for Ant early in the game. Like there kind of had to be some non-Randle Ant minutes, but he also does it by choice. Early 4th quarter, he's been doing a lot of that. And there just isn't, like, Bones Highland is not Anthony Edwards. And I know people love Bones, and I know after he had his hot couple weeks in the rotation, everybody wanted to say, no trade needed, Bones is the guy. Well, Bones had 3 points on 6 shots in this game. And we're going on several games in a row where he's just jacked threes and made like 20% of them, basically. The offense, this side of Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle, is completely non-existent. And Nas was good in this game again. He had a couple head-scratching plays late in the game, some bad turnovers, etc. But Nas was still very good overall. Julius Randle was good overall. A lot of turnovers between those guys, but at least they were both creating some offense. And Anthony Edwards just didn't shoot the ball well. But there's nobody else that's even a threat. I mean, Dante DiVincenzo's slump has, I guess, started over. We're back in a slump for Dante. And again, he's essentially a catch and shoot guy from the perimeter, right? Like he's not creating much of his own offense. Whatever, there was a little bit of, Knicks Dante earlier this season where he was putting the ball on the floor and doing a little bit more. We're not seeing that right now. Rudy turned in another 10 and 11. Like you're not going to rely on him for offense. He's does what he does. Jaden has kind of faded a little bit. Shooting wise, he was fine in this game. He had 16 points on 9 shots, but the lineups where he is the best offensive player, that's just a tenuous thing. And again, Nas did his part, especially early. He made his first 3 threes, left the game with the shoulder issue and then came back in the game, thankfully, and was fine overall. But the lack of juice, and this is, I guess, where we could talk about the bench as well. The non-Nas members of the bench combined to shoot 3 of 15 from the field. So if your name is not Nas Reid and you came off the Timberwolves bench, you're one of those 4 guys. You shot 3 of 15 collectively. Collectively, you shot 2 of 11 outside the arc. Said another way, they scored 8 points on 15 shots. They attempted 0 free throws. That's not going to get it done. You have to have more than, I know that people have been saying on X, the Wolves have 6.5 guys. That's actually pretty accurate because Jalen Clark's half a guy. And honestly, you could play him 10, 12, 14 minutes in a playoff series just fine. But he can't be your 7th guy. And Mike Conley and Bones Highland are not playoff playable guys. Berenger might be, but he's also your 4th big. There's nobody else in the backcourt. All right, there's nobody in the backcourt besides Jalen Clark, who, again, is an ancillary player. If he's your 9th guy, you're in good shape. He can't be your 7th guy. And I know that sounds like we're splitting hairs here, but it's not. You need somebody that has some offensive punch that you know you can play consistently in a playoff situation, and they don't have that. And this gets back to the trade deadline conversation. I did this extensively on Tuesday. Somewhat ironically, they play the Bulls, who have 3 guys the Wolves are reportedly interested in between Trey Jones, Ayo Dosunmu, and Kobe White in this game that did the Wolves in. I mean, and they all played well in this game too. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I want to get to my third of my 3 big things, and we'll close with individual studs and duds. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Game Time, our title sponsors at Game Time. During basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The energy, the crowd, the first big run that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. And that's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets, fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Seeing the view from your seat before buying makes choosing tickets easy and should instill confidence in you in the whole process. The prices include fees up front, so total's clear from the start. That's my favorite piece. Plus, features like zone deals will help you unlock great seats at even better value. Whether it's an NBA game or another live event, everything is right there in one place. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen of the day. And of course, thanks for helping to make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Wolves. It's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. Plus, you'll get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. Has a group chat just for listeners of this show and every other Locked On show. There's a general Locked On NBA chat. I've been in there pretty frequently the last couple weeks, so make sure to sign up. Join the Locked On Wolves channel on Discord, and we'll see you over there. Go to lockedonwolves.supercast.com or tap in the link in the show notes to learn more. Again, lockedonwolves.supercast.com. Okay. So my first 2 big things were the lazy defense, handling the Ant off night. And actually, just to put a bow on that, I do want to talk quickly about the 3 Bulls players that are all better than any Timberwolves bench player not named Nas Reid. The Timberwolves are reportedly interested in Kobe White, who had 22 points on 16 shots in 30 minutes in this game. Really good early, keeping the Bulls in the game, and hit a massive 3 later. We'll talk about it in just a second, or I should say late in the game, on a blown defensive coverage by the Wolves and by Ant. I would assume it was the worst of the 3 in this game. I think he's actually, I don't think he's the best fit of the 3, but I like him the most as an all-around player. I think he's the most well-rounded player of the 3. I said the other day, I think he's a Dante DiVincenzo light. There's a lot of what Dosunmu does that's very similar to Dante. He's not quite as good of a 3-point shooter, but he's a good 3-point shooter, and he's got a little off the dribble game. He can be a good defender. I don't know that he's quite as good as Dante, but there's a lot he does that's good. He was fine in this game. And then Trey Jones was really good. Also down the stretch, 12 points on 7 shots, 7 assists in this game to just 2 turnovers, a typical, Tyus/Trey Jones point guard performance. He had a steal as well coming off the bench, and he tied for a game high +9 in plus minus. How nice would it be to have Trey Jones in the Mike Conley role? I know it stinks he's not a better shooter, but I don't know. Like that's the only real drawback. Other than that, I mean, he's a little undersized. He's a little bigger than Tyus, but to have Trey Jones in the Mike Conley role would be very nice. That would be a good upgrade for Minnesota. All right. My last of my 3 big things before we move on to studs and duds here in just a minute. The crunch time failures, for the Timberwolves in this game were real. Despite everything, like you'd think they lost by, 10 or 15. Wolves only lost by 5. This was a 1 possession game late, and the Wolves are actually up. Minnesota was up by 3 with 1:49 remaining. Actually, they were up by 4 with 1:17 left. But I actually want to back up a little bit to when Minnesota was up by a single point. Take that back. When Minnesota was up by 3 points with 3 minutes to play. Ant takes a somewhat ill-advised three-pointer and misses. Josh Giddey gets the rebound. They hit ahead. Trey Jones just dribbles right past. Who did he beat off the dribble? I think it was Conley, actually. He dribbled right past somebody. I'm pretty sure it was Conley. I think he was still in the game at that point, but he dribbled right past somebody for a layup. Okay, there's perimeter defense. Back to my first of my 3 big things that were an issue in this game. It's a 1-point game. On the other end, Julius Randle commits an obvious offensive foul. The Wolves challenge it, probably because it was just such a pivotal play. I thought it was the rare time where the Wolves challenged, where they still had something to lose. Like it's still a 1-point game with 2 minutes to play, so you shouldn't waste it. But, it goes from being, I think he made the shot. I think it could have been an and one, to a foul on Randle, who ends up fouling out, and, possession to the Bulls when you're only up by 1. So I get why they challenged it, but it was pretty clearly a charge. He gets called for the charge. It's now the Bulls ball. Kobe White travels, which, fortunate there. And then coming back the other way, Anthony Edwards hits a tough shot in the paint. It's now a 3-point game again. But they immediately give up a dunk to Jalen Smith 12 seconds later. Good pass from Josh Giddey. But now it's back to a 1-point game because the defense was so bad down the stretch. Jaden hits an impossible step-back 3, which I thought was actually kind of an ill-advised shot. But he made it. So they're up 4 with 1:17 left. And this is, I think, when everybody was feeling pretty good. And then what happens on the other end? The Bulls are on a set to get Kobe White. I think he was coming off a pin down. The Wolves lose the coverage. Ant just completely loses him in the wash and doesn't even really get a contest off in the corner. So a wide open corner 3 for Kobe White. He drills it, and now the Wolves are only up by a point with a minute left. Julius Randle turns it over on a terrible pass on the other end. Trey Jones gets his steal. And then it's a bit of a back and forth down the stretch where the Wolves also just lose the ball out of bounds, which easily could have been either a foul or out of bounds off Chicago. I think it was off the Bulls, but the Wolves, of course, didn't have a challenge because they used it on the Randle play. So now it goes back to the Bulls. Trey Jones makes a bucket in the paint. They go up 1, and they keep the lead. Ant takes a pull-up 3 on the other side. After the take foul and free throws from Jalen Smith, the Wolves run a play. Ant just misses the 3, and that's basically it. So I, again, point the finger at the defense first because the Bulls' offense came way too easily down the stretch. I know the Wolves didn't score enough in crunch time to win, but the bigger problem was the defense was just lazy down the stretch. The defense was not as intense as it needed to be. It would be another way to say that down the stretch when they needed it the most. And then on the flip side, the offense was, we'll call it spotty. From the Randle turnover to the Randle charge to the Randle turnover to the McDaniels losing the ball out of bounds to a couple of the Ant shots that he picked, even the Jaden shot that he took that he made. The process just was not there. And for the most part, the crunch time offense has been better this season for Minnesota. Last year, it was a greater point of contention. There certainly have been downturns this year, but the failures in crunch time we can point right back to my first 2 of my 2 big things. The problems were illuminated when the rubber met the road in crunch time, right? The lazy defense and the non-Ant offense, the lack of process offensively that can generate shots wasn't there in crunch time either. So both of those issues, again, were illuminated down the stretch. Whereas for the Bulls, these guys that the Wolves have interest in, it was almost exclusively Kobe White and Trey Jones with a little bit of Josh Giddey down the stretch, and Jalen Smith made some free throws and all that stuff. But it was those guys that were so impressive between Trey Jones and Kobe White that really kind of made things tick for the Bulls down the stretch. All right, we'll talk about Timberwolves individual studs and duds here in just a moment. That's how we'll close out the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel's making them even better every Friday night before the games tip off. FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern, that's 5 to 6:30 p.m. Central Time, have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window starts. The timing is perfect. It's right before the games start and right before your weekend starts, too. Of course, no Wolves game tonight, but plenty of NBA action as always on a Friday night. It'll add extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So, before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That's 5 to 6:30 Central Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, closing today, as we always do on the postgame pod with individual studs and duds. Pretty clear line of demarcation here, if you will. Timberwolves had 3 guys that scored 20 or more points, and I thought they were the 3 best players on the floor, mostly because the rest of the offense was atrociously inefficient. Like, we could just say it this way, and it totally is up now. Julius Randle, Anthony Edwards, and Reid, as a trio, made 27 shots in this game. They were 27 of 54. Okay, so that's, I think, exactly 50%. 27 of 54. Randle, Edwards, and Reid together. The rest of the team shot 16 of 39. The rest of the team shot 16 of 39. So, if you're scoring at home, that's 41%. Not horrific, but it's also volume-wise a lot lower than what those other 3 guys were able to do. And, wasn't great. But I don't know, like, who else would you pick as a stud? I guess you could argue Jaden McDaniels hit the big 3 down the stretch. I'll take that argument. We'll start with Naz, though. Naz had 20 points on 8 of 12 shooting. He was 4 of 7 on threes. He was 3 of his first 3 before he left with the shoulder injury and came back. He had 6 boards, 5 assists, and 5 stocks in this game. 2 steals, 3 blocks. A couple of very nice defensive plays from Naz. He also turned it over 3 times. Some silly ones and silly moments, but again, like, given who played well and who didn't play well for this Wolves team down the stretch, or really overall in this game, Naz absolutely was a stud. He helped the offense go, especially the non-Randle, non-Ant minutes. And if I was very worried that shoulder was going to be more serious there initially, and thankfully he was able to come back in the game. But I mean, his arm was like hanging at his side for a couple of possessions before they could take him out. But he was great. 26 and 5 plus 5 stocks in this game for Naz Reid, and really kind of kept the non-Randle and offense minutes afloat. Julius Randle, bad turnovers in crunch time. But what do you want me to do? If I'm naming 3 studs in this game, he had 30 points on 17 shots. He had 7 boards, 6 assists. First on the team in scoring, first on the team in assists, second in rebounding in this game. And yeah, he fouled out in 31 minutes, and he had 2 brutal crunch time turnovers. But I don't know, who else you picking? They're not in that position if it wasn't for some of the offense Julius provided along the way. And the Bulls are a good matchup for him. Like, there's not, I mean, nobody's slowing him down, right? Like Jalen Smith, he gets switched on to like a Buzelis. Like, they're not slowing him down. Obviously he could beat Vucevic off the dribble. Like, anybody on the Bulls that's going to guard him, he's going to dominate. So it's a good matchup for him, and I thought he played well other than crunch time, which is obviously a big caveat, but I don't know. Again, what are you going to do? And the other one almost has to be Ant. He started the game like gangbusters. It looked like it was over before he left the game with the 2 personal fouls early in the first quarter, 4 minutes in. He finished with just 20 points on 25 shots, 1 of 8 shooting, 6 boards, 3 assists. But again, was the only real source of like, hey, we could get a shot whenever, and it feels like the shot's going in. You could argue Jaden McDaniels. I thought this was actually one of the better Jaden games in a while. And you know what? I've talked myself out of it, and he was bad enough shooting the ball and decision-wise and some of that stuff along the way. He's not a dud, but he's not quite a stud either. I've talked myself out of that and into Jaden McDaniels. That big three-pointer that put the Wolves up 4 with over a minute to play was huge. 16 points on 6 of 9 shooting, made both of his three-point attempts, 2 of 2 at the free throw line, 5 boards, 5 assists, only 2 turnovers. He had a block, and I thought was good. I thought Jaden was good. So I've amended what I said initially. We'll go with Naz, Randle, and Jaden as my studs. Duds in this game, man. Can we just say the whole non-Naz bench? Usually I just go with 2 duds. Bones was rough. He just came in and started jacking threes, and he made one of them. But it was like hot potato, but not like I got to pass the ball. It's like I got to shoot it as soon as I touch it. 3 points on 1 of 6, 1 of 5 on threes, and 2 rebounds and assists, a steal and a block. So a little bit of activity there from Bones. Jalen Clark was good defensively as usual, but was subpar offensively as usual. 2 points on 3 shots, missed both of his 3-point attempts. Mike Conley was exactly what we've seen a lot of Mike Conley lately. He did make a corner 3. Eerily similar line to Bones Highland in this game. 2 assists. He did have 2 assists, 1 turnover, 3 boards in 14 minutes, but he was 1 of 5 shooting, 1 of 4 on threes for Conley. And Béranger did get, I'll call them rotation minutes because it wasn't garbage time. So he played 3 minutes in the first quarter. It was pretty quiet. He had 1 offensive rebound. That's really the only thing he did. He was a -5 in 3 minutes. Not really his fault. The perimeter contained was miserable. It was when Mike Conley was on the floor. So I don't know. It'd be great to see Béranger get more run, especially in a game where you had Randle ultimately foul out and Naz left briefly due to injury. I feel like there could have been an opportunity to find a few more minutes, and especially with how bad the defense was, right? We've said this before. I've said all season, 2 of the 3 of Gobert, McDaniels, and Clark should be on the floor at all time. Could we put Béranger in that same category? Should we say 2 of the 4 of them should be on the floor at all times? I think we're about there. The defense is good enough. And yeah, you're taking a hit offensively. You are when Clark's on the floor too. So in a perfect world, it's not those 2 together, because that now you've got 2 non-shooters on the floor essentially together with Clark and Béranger. I don't know that that's palatable from an offensive perspective, but could you have one of the 2 of them plus one of the 2 of McDaniels and Gobert? Now, obviously Gobert's a non-shooter too. So that, you have 3 guys that are pretty defensively focused when it comes to, or when you talk about Béranger, Clark, and Gobert, with varying levels of offensive effectiveness. So obviously the rest of the lineup there with matters. Perhaps we'll have a bit more fun with lineups early next week and talk a little bit about how that potentially could shake out for the Wolves. Next up, Minnesota does not play tonight. Another weird Friday night without a game. I guess they played last Friday against Houston, but it feels like there's been more Fridays without games than is typical for the Wolves. Part of that is probably much more of the national TV. And actually, I'm not crazy. I'm looking right now. They played last Friday. The last Friday night that they played on was the Friday before Christmas. So they've played 1 out of 4 Fridays. Crazy. Anyway, next up is the Warriors on Saturday. Of course, the Jimmy Butler-less Warriors, which is too bad to see Jimmy go down with the injury, obviously. And it's always more fun when Steph is competitive. Since then, the Warriors, have lost twice to the Raptors and Mavericks. So obviously a winnable game for the Wolves. It's a 4:30 p.m. matinee on ABC at Target Center. So 4:30 on Saturday on ABC. We'll have the the live postcast on YouTube following the game with that audio right here on wherever you like to listen to audio podcasts. And then I'll be back Monday morning. We'll do a bit of a hybrid post-game pod and a bit of a step back, bigger picture since we'll be a day plus removed. It'll probably get posted late Sunday if you want to look out for that for Monday's pod. And then the Wolves play the Warriors again at Target Center. Golden State gets to spend the weekend in the frigid, extreme cold, we'll call it, which, happens once a year in Minnesota. It's whatever. But the Warriors will have a nice time spending 48 hours in the Twin Cities, or 72 hours or whatever it's going to be, as they play Golden State again on Monday. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that if you never miss an episode, be sure to check out the Locked On Wolves, the Locked On period, Everydayer Club It's built for you. Go to lockedonwolves.supercast.com. You can get Locked On Wolves ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Again, lockedonwolves.supercast.com to join the club. Remember, the Locked On Wolves podcast is also part of the Locked On Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.